Hi, thank you for joining us live. I'm Andrew Bronski. This is my friend and colleague, Mark Carbone. We'd like to welcome to the first ever Chalk Talks. We're hoping this will be the first of many in a series of talks looking at education. We're going to jump into a variety of topics, really kind of talk about what are the current needs of the educational space, and also looking to what do we see happening in the future as well, and where things are headed. We love to have audience engagement. So if you're looking to engage with us in some way, shape, or form, you can always reach out on Twitter. That's at chalk.com. That's CHALKDOTCOM. You can always use the hashtag ChalkTalks. We love when guests kind of submit topics or reach out and engage in some way. So feel free to drop us a line that way. And you can also reach us online by visiting chalk.com/ChalkTalks. And again, if you want to reach out and tweet us, that's chalk.com, CHALKDOTCOM. All right, so like I said, thank you for joining us here in the first one. We want to start off with some introductions and introducing ourselves here. So I'm going to pass off to Mark Carbone and let him take it away.
Great, thanks very much, Andrew. I enjoyed a 35-year career with the Waterloo Region District School Board before retiring. During that time, I had an active role as a teacher of mathematics, computer science, and music. I also served as an information technology consultant, assistant IT manager, and the last quarter of my career was an honor for me to serve the school board as their chief information officer. I realize in my retirement mode, I'm still very passionate about the things that I worked at in the school board, and I'm pleased to be working with a variety of schools right now as a consultant. I consider myself to be an open learner, love to learn, love to share, so I'm an active blogger, I'm a podcaster, and appreciate the support of Voice Ed Radio for helping to promote those podcasts. And certainly one of the highlights of my career was working on the Awesome MOOC project with Donna Fry, really trying to engage school and system leaders in the idea of connected learning. So that's a little bit about me. I'll turn things back to Andrew.
Thanks, Mark. I'm always impressed with your resume, and that was going to be the very abbreviated short version of all the things you've done in the educational space. So
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you on this. So I'm Andrew Bronski. I'm a high school English teacher in Kitchener, Ontario, born and raised in the area here, and great to be here in Chalk's offices in Kitchener, in the Innovation Hub. And for myself, I was trained in pedagogy at Western Ontario, and my first year of teaching, I actually moved to London, England, and taught in a high school there, which is a great experience. Taking a different way of looking at the educational space. It was very different from Canada. And from there, yeah, I've taken on a bunch of different things. Some kind of really transformative things in my practice as a teacher was participating in the Futures Forum project here in the Waterloo region, which focused on a cross-curricular approach to education. So taking grade 10 English, civics, and careers, blending those together with a big focus on integrating technology in the classroom, and really looking at helping students develop their digital citizenship skills and kind of create an online presence and profile and kind of build the skills for what we thought future jobs would be looking like. So that was a really transformative space for me, and really opened my eyes to a lot of amazing things happening in education, people doing some great stuff. So I came very passionate in that space, which kind of led me to here, and looking to kind of build on that. One thing I took on was TEDx Kitchener Ed, which is a TEDx event with talks focused around the educational space and pushing education forward, which is something I've got a great passion for. And so I was looking to do that. I was very happy to have you as one of the first speakers at the very inaugural one.
It was an honor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so it's kind of grown over time. It's been a great platform to help get the word out, and truly kind of jumping into Chalk Talks here as well. That's kind of what I'm hoping to do with this space well for myself. So with that in mind, as I mentioned at the start here, looking to make this a series of talks and jumping into different topics in education for what does the space need today, and also where is it headed in the future. We're looking to bring various guests at different time, and you and I will be tackling that in different ways. But we wanted to give you all kind of some insights into what some topics we might look at in the future. And again, feel free to reach out to us and share some ideas, either through Twitter or through the website. So Mark, what's one topic in education that you're kind of passionate and fascinated by right now?
Well, I think I'll begin our discussion by maybe a point of reference back to the Awesome MOOC project, with a firm belief that connected learners need connected leaders, connected teachers. We're fortunate enough to be alive at a time when the possibilities of education are literally endless. And in thinking about technology-enabled learning, we really have an opportunity to let kids learn in a different way, and to connect them to the best teachers, the best resources, partner them with other classes, connect things to global competencies and global learning perspectives. And while I think there's many initiatives underway that show how that can be done, I still think there's a lot of work to do to make that commonplace, almost thinking about it as an equitable experience for our students.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. I think, again, in the age of the internet where it's so easy to connect with others now, for myself as a classroom teacher, I call it teacher island a little bit. You know, you're the only adult in the classroom most of the time. In our board, you know, you might have your principal come in like once every 5 years to spend a class with you to kind of do a review and see how you're doing. But other than that, you can really be on your own, and you get the chance around the water cooler to talk to your colleagues a little bit, but you're in this very, very small group of people. And so I think that piece of finding connections and learning from each other and being that kind of lifelong learner is really, really important. You know, for me, Twitter was really, really big in that space 5 or 6 years ago. Was I could just go online and follow people from all across the world who are doing fascinating things and see the resources they are sharing. And it's really helped me develop as a teacher and a person through those connections. And again, you mentioned for students too, and I think it's in a really interesting space. Instead of being tied to the 25 or 30 kids in a walls of a classroom, taking your students online and opening up to that world gives them so many opportunities that weren't there before.
I love that you bring out the idea of the personal learning network. I mean, you referenced Twitter as one example. Of course, there's many ways to connect, but to me, what's important there is this idea that we all have opportunities to own our own learning and to really think outside of the classroom, so to speak. There's, you know, teaching in isolation now is really, it's a choice. And I guess there's a good question there for debate around, should that choice even be accepted?
Sure.
There's so much to be gained from team teaching, partnering up, you know, global opportunities, that it changes and enriches learning in ways that were never before possible. It would seem a shame that a student would miss that kind of opportunity.
Yeah, I think there's a push for that now too. Absolutely. And one thing too, if you're looking to try something, but you're a little reluctant to go into, maybe heard a great idea, finding people in that online space, knowing that other people are doing it, they're going through the same things as you, they're sharing, they're blogging about it, they're jumping into Twitter, they're live streaming their class, what's happening in it. Being able to jump in as an educator and see what's going on in other classrooms gives you a sense of confidence that maybe you wouldn't have had otherwise, you know, feeling you're not alone in that space, and you can find these connections online to people doing great things.
I think one of the interesting changes to me that maybe applies to the last decade or so is really the whole establishment and growth of the blogosphere within the educational context. It's great to see an ever increasing number of teachers blogging about what they're doing. They're sharing, they're asking questions, they're talking about what they might do differently. You know, to have such an open community and to see it growing, I think is a very powerful piece in the notion of educational change.
For sure. In fact, we've been focusing on collaboration, that kind of online presence. I'm going to kind of switch over to another topic now and kind of play with that space. So I think could be related, very related to it though, is talking about students building a digital presence and profile. Because I think that can be somewhat controversial in some ways. There's been a lot of discussion around that. Should we be putting students online? What age do we put them online at? Are we just throwing them into the fire? Or should we be teaching the skills? It is a space to avoid. Do we make students own that space? So what are your thoughts on digital citizenship?
Well, I think it's an important topic for sure. And to put it in the context of being a natural part of the learning, a natural part of your growth process as a student, I think is critical. I don't really see how to do that if you don't have access to that space.
Sure.
Of course, you can think about safe spaces, you know, a graduated, scaffolded approach, the teachers as role models, all educators as role models, not just classroom teachers. I think that's important because the kind of opportunities that will come through digital means will only increase. And I see that as a key piece of student learning.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, I don't think I have a great answer for the age to start, but I think it's really important that schools and classrooms are working with students in online spaces and helping them build a digital profile and a digital presence. we're in a space to like, I mean, we've had a culture of fear around that for a long time. It's like, you don't want anyone to find anything bad about you. You know, it's like, lock down your profiles. Like, make sure Facebook's lock down Instagram. But there's another space to say like, no, it's actually very important that people can find you and find positive things about you. I know a lot of college universities now, they get an application from a student, and one of the first things they do is Google them and see the great stuff they can hopefully find about them, and that goes into consideration. Do you have an online portfolio of your work? If you're an artist or a writer, or whatever your passions are, how does that play about you? And I would think for a lot of employers in this day and age too, HR is Googling people and seeing what they can find and saying, are you a good fit? And so I think it's very important at a relatively early age. We're fostering, one, as educators, we're modeling that for our students, but at the same time too, we're helping them build that digital presence.
I'm glad you mentioned the example of social media in the context of promoting yourself. I was actually just talking with an educator the other day about the idea of, what does a 2018 portfolio look like in terms of art? And the conversation went to the space of talking about, well, maybe posting your work through social media platforms such as Instagram is actually a way of having a living document sort of component in your portfolio. Of course, you could have a more formalized website or something that's maybe hosted by your school board organization, but having something that's out there and it will live beyond your time in the school system, I think is an important notion too.
Sure.
Sort of thinking of it as a continuum.
Yep, absolutely. So we've talked about a few, I think what I'd say were issues kind of maybe like in the current space of education. I think there's like education is a fascinating space, and that there's some great pockets of things happening. We talk about what does the future of education look like and where is it going? And it's a blend of kind of what's happening now in smaller areas and kind of how does that scale out? I can say one thing that I find a big buzzword in education right now, and one that I'm really fascinated by, is what we're talking about as the personalization of learning. I'm really, really fascinated by the space. One thing I love to point out to people, Ken Robinson's TED Talk, most watched TED Talk of all time. He was like the face of TED for years. It's over 10 years old now. And when you say that to people, they kind of stop and think, like, I think so many educators have seen that at PD sessions or played it, and like even outside of the educational space, a lot of people watch and they all agree with the talk and they're nodding around what Robinson's saying. And these are great ideas. We need to change the system. And here we are 10 years later. And a lot of people are kind of like looking back like, oh, that was 10 years ago. And they're kind of looking around and like, things look pretty much similar to how they were 10 years ago, and he had all these great calls, and we agree, we got to foster creativity in students. We've got to really kind of personalize the space and look at individual needs for learners, but how are we getting there? We're not there. And I think, no one really has a good answer for what the path forward is for that. And some people are pointing to technology as a space to make that happen. Some are pointing to pedagogy and what's like teacher practice. And so I'm really, really just interested in that space. What are your thoughts on it?
Great question. And as you pointed out, not straightforward to answer. I would hope that one thing that comes out of that space is people that are in the front lines, in the classrooms with the students, are able to foster that curiosity and passion for simply trying new things, trying things out of the box. When I think about your word, personalization in particular, it can start in small ways by, honoring student voice, giving students choice.
Sure.
I think those are great starting places, and ultimately it is something that educators have to adjust to if you've been used to a more formalized, predictable system, I'll say. But what about the bigger parts of that in terms of choosing individualized programs, looking at things, I'll say, outside of what we might call constraints in terms of the length of the school day, particular methodologies for establishing timetable and use of the facilities in the school. We can look at those as important things from certain perspectives, but I tend to ponder that as wondering, well, maybe they're barriers at the same time, and how might we look at those things in different ways?
I think I totally agree with the barrier piece too. I'm fascinated by schools and how they're run and how they're organized and how they put together and how we look at them. And so I try to do a thought experiment of like, what if you could, because everyone knows what school is. Everyone went to school, right?
Absolutely.
Various lengths of time, but we all have our own experience with it, positive and negative. We all have our own idea of what school is. And so I think everyone kind of feels like they know what it looks like. And so we sit down to really think about what really should it be? I think if a lot of people say, if you could start from scratch and build a school, they would not build something of the way it looks today. But that being said, I think a lot of people would agree with that, but then we don't have agreement on what it should look like and where it should go. And that's a really interesting space and time. I think it's a question we need to be asking ourselves more and more. We're physically building schools all the time. Are we designing the same way? Is that the right space? Should we be? I think coming back to the personalization space, it's an interesting blend of teacher pedagogy, admin practices, and how they're fostering a culture within their school, and also technology. I think technology is finally going to allow us to get a space where we can start looking at individualized learners and putting personal learning plans forward for students and allowing teachers to follow that space. I think, without the technology, that's an impossible standard for a teacher to expect of a teacher to personalize learning for their students. But I think tech can be great there too. And then on the flip side, I'll throw this one at you too, because we're talking about like tech, be playing a really important role in the classroom. As a high school teacher here in his 30s, should I be worried about losing my job anytime soon to technology, or?
I don't think so. Absolutely no worries there. I certainly put myself in the category of super passionate about the use of technology in the classroom, but it's more than holding content or hosting an e-learning classroom. It's really using technology to do things that were not previously possible. And so that's where I think going back to this idea of the connected educator, different kinds of learning experiences, putting technology-enabled learning experiences with personalization create some different possibilities. And I think another piece of this personalization is the context of what about the outside world beyond K-12?
Yep.
So even if K-12 was successful in, let's say, moving it yards forward, meters, depending where you are, how would those kind of learning experiences be viewed, say, by the job market, by parents? Parents often consider their child's educational experience relative to what they experienced.
For sure.
Of course, we all know the world's changing and changing ever more rapidly. So how do we have those conversations about moving to a better place?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. As a high school teacher myself, we kind of feel pressure from both sides. I think there's a lot of innovative stuff happening in K-8 education right now. And then we've got students coming to secondary and okay, well, we should probably be looking at maybe doing some more project-based learning or inquiry-based learning or self-directed learning for our students. But then there's also that pressure from a lot of secondaries teachers to look at universities or colleges and saying, well, my job's are prepping for them. And so what's the dynamic? What is my job as an educator? What is this job? What is the school system's job? How are we preparing students, or is it right for the job force? More and more students are looking at the space of maybe college, university is not the space for me, and I'm looking at a different route, but how do we get there and how do we look at skills?
Well, and maybe there's merit to that old phrase about the art of teaching.
Sure.
Maybe it just takes on a different context. And what does that mean? I loved your description of the classroom space. And I just wonder, maybe it's important that we even look at that a bit more globally, so that as a particular child moves through the education system, they have some inquiry-based, some project-based, some genius hour, some online experiences, some independent learning. They need that whole mix, I think, to come out as having a rich learning experience.
For sure. Well, I think we're kind of getting towards the end of time for the first one here. But again, and some of the ideas going forward for this is we're going to look off and break into a branch of different talks, bring different people in with different voices, look at different topics. I know you're looking at maybe possibly some more talks around the admin side or the IT side. Really quickly, without diving in deeply into them, what are some topics you think you might be interested to discuss or even hearing from other people about?
Well, I think one thing that's on my mind now, but has been for a few years, is really sort of considering all the types of topics that we've talked about here tonight, and thinking about how do we really come to grips with the rate of change. And so I wonder about this idea of knowledge mobilization, but what if we could tailor that specifically to a K-12 context? What might that mean in terms of personalization of learning, teachers changing their practice, making sure that teachers have enough training and confidence to think about the art of teaching, but in today's world?
Yeah.
So that would be one area. How about you?
Yeah, I'll be focusing more on the classroom side and the pedagogy side, I think. But for me, yeah, there's like so many interesting things happening out there. Collaborations we talked earlier. I mentioned inquiry and project-based learning a bit. The modernization of assessment, and what does assessment look like? I mean, are we looking at formative? Are we looking at products? Are we looking at conversations or observations in the classroom? Yeah, in that space, teacher collaboration or cross-divisional collaboration between schools and districts and things along those lines. So, and like you said, we've talked about too, the personalization already as well. So I think those are some of the bigger topics I'd like to speak to. But with all that being said, both Mark and I are looking to really engage our audience, and we'd love to hear from you. And what do you want to hear about? Do you want to talk? Do you want to join us possibly on the show? Or are there topics you'd like to hear about? So again, a quick reminder of how you can reach out to us on Twitter at chalk.com. That's CHALKDOTCOM. You can always use the hashtag Chalk Talks. Again, we'd love for guests to come in and submit topics. There's various ways you can do that if you're joining us through Twitter or through Facebook Live. And also feel free to visit on the website at chalk.com/talktalks. Well, and again, really looking at a quick, easy summary here of what we're looking to talk about in the future. We're really looking at big ideas in education, both right now and what's happening, and also kind of where the space is headed in the future. So I want to thank you all for joining us, and you'll see us again soon.